All right. Welcome, everyone, to our Author Spotlight series featuring our faculty extraordinaire, Margaret Andrews. Now, during this hour, she will discuss her new book, Manage Yourself to Lead Others: Why Great Leadership Begins with Self-Understanding. She will also take your questions live. Now, my name is Jill Felicio, and I'm the Director of Advancement here at Harvard DCE, as well as a double alum from Harvard Extension School. Now, feel free throughout the hour to utilize chat, to say hello, share where you are in the world, but post all of your questions right in our Q&A box. Margaret will answer them later in the hour. Now, as you might have just heard, this event is being recorded and will be captioned and shared on our YouTube channel shortly. So, Margaret Andrews is an executive, educator, and speaker with more than 30 years of experience in leadership and organizational development. She teaches several professional and executive development programs here at Harvard that are focused on leadership, emotional intelligence, and organizational culture. She's also the founder of the Milo Center, a leadership development firm. Now, Margaret earned her undergrad degree from the University of California at Berkeley and earned her graduate degree from the MIT Sloan School of Management. Her new book, Manage Yourself to Lead Others, was published just this September. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Margaret Andrews.
Thank you, Jill. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. We are just delighted to have you, Margaret. Now, let's get started just by simply framing your book. So you write the quality leadership begins with self-understanding. Can you tell us why this is so foundational in leading
Yeah.
others?
Yes. And I think it's a little different than a lot of what we hear about with leadership. Leadership oftentimes is about us to them and getting people to do, go from one place to another. But really, the more effective leadership begins within, and that is really understanding yourself, and then managing yourself to the leader you want to become. And understanding yourself really helps because it roots you, right? It grounds you. And so you understand who you are and how you became the person that you are, the influences throughout your life, how you define success, your core values, and the impact on other people as well.
That's fabulous. Now, I did already share that you have been at Harvard for a very long time, 30 plus years. Can you
Is
share
that
a little
right?
bit about what that has been like and what you may have
Yeah.
cherished about teaching here?
Yeah, so I started at Harvard, gosh, a long time ago. I can't even remember what year it was. And I started off as the associate dean for management programs. And so at that time, we kind of revamped the programs and things like that. And while I was there, we started the professional development program. So it took a lot of very popular classes, and
Mm.
stripped away all the reading and the papers and the tests and things like that and created 2 and 3 and 4, 5 day types of programs. So, but I just have always loved DCE because it is a place where people come to improve themselves. And I'm somebody who really believes in potential and just loves it when people unlock their own potential. And to me, that's what DCE is all about. And I've had students from all over the world, and they wake up at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock, whatever it is, to be
Mhm.
part of class, and that takes a lot, and so I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, I could not agree more. I mean, we have, so many people who have earned their degrees, studying in the wee hours, like burning
Mhm.
midnight oil, and total gold star for getting that done. It's incredible. But I
Absolutely.
completely agree. Transformation is kind of the name of the game here. And with it just being our 50th anniversary of DCE, shout out to you for helping found professional executive development. Like that is just incredible. What a wonderful suite of programs that is. So if you have not had a chance to look at those programs, I implore you to. I've taken several myself, and they are just wonderful. So Margaret, let's get into self-management.
Mm.
what does it mean to manage yourself before
Mm,
meeting others? Can you tell us
yes.
a little bit more about that?
Sure. So let me just back up and just do these three questions that I usually do with folks to really help them understand it. And the first question is, what type of leader are you now? And that means, what words and phrases would you use to describe yourself as a leader? These are the good words and the not so good words, the ones you're proud of and the ones you're not so proud of. And then, what words would other people use about you? Then the second question is, what type of leader would you like to become? And what words and phrases would you and others use to describe that leader? And then, of course, the third question is, well, what's the difference, right? What's the difference
Mm.
between that leader you want to become and the leader you are now? And I ask people to pay particular attention to behaviors, because it's very often the behaviors that we need to modify to become that leader.
Hmm.
And so managing ourselves is about thinking of, what kind of leader do I want to become? Maybe I want to become somebody that has more empathy, or that is a better listener or delegates more effectively. Like, you can think of all the different things that might come up. And then it is managing yourself toward that. So, we've all heard Viktor Frankl's quote, probably, that he says, between stimulus and response, there is a moment in between. And in that pause, there is, we get to choose our response, and that therein lies our growth. And that is exactly what managing ourselves is all about. It is essentially replacing a habitual way of doing or behaving and implementing something that is more effective.
Great. So a purposeful pause, almost being mindful of
Yes, that's a great
behavior.
word for it. Yes, absolutely.
Fascinating. I mean, can you talk a little bit about what it's like, kind of practically managing emotional versus intentional actions and behaviors? I mean, can you give
Yeah.
any advice for how to do that?
Sure, sure. I think that the thing is, so if you think about, okay, to become the leader that I want to be, some people might say, I want to be a better, more effective listener, meaning, I don't cut people off, I don't finish their sentences, whatever it is, or delegate more effective, right? Whatever it is. Then you think about the next time you're in that situation. So, Jill, if for example, I want to learn to
Mhm.
listen better, then if you and I are talking, maybe normally I cut you off or say, that won't work, or whatever. But then if I find myself when we're together and I'm about ready to launch into something and cut you off, right, there's that pause. And so I might be quiet, and
Great.
just listen, because as we know, sometimes people say something that we're not expecting, and when we interrupt people, we're missing all of that. So
Mhm.
it's intentional. It's knowing, how do I want to show up? I want to be the person that listens more effectively, or the person that doesn't get angry when people disagree with me, or whatever those things are. And then thinking, okay, next time I'm in a situation where this is going to come up, I want to think about it beforehand, and then be very present in that moment when this new behavior is needed. And what I have found, and I think other people have told me they have found, is it just feels so much better when they do that. And so it feels so much better that they think, oh, I want to do this more. But you have to catch yourself. So you do have to, and will you mess up? Yes, you will
Mhm.
mess up.
Great. So reinforcing over time, like a good habit, say.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is I explained the concept of the S curve. That a lot of times when we are trying a new behavior, we think, oh, okay, so I am going to listen better all day, every day. And the thing is that because we're not used to it, that's not our habitual way of doing things, we're probably not good at it yet.
Mhm.
And so in the very beginning, you might look around and see, well, who is really good at listening? Let me watch them for a while, or maybe even ask them for advice. And then you start to put things together. And you will make a lot of mistakes as you go through, but then you get better slowly and then quickly, and then you level off in whatever, new behavior you're trying to learn. So then it's time to try for a new one.
That's great. Now, can you also talk a little bit about, I mean, what I think is so very key just in human relations, but empathy and developing
Mm.
a genuine sense of empathy while also maintaining accountability and, just general authority. Can you
Hmm.
talk about that
Hmm.
balance or how to get there, develop more
Yeah,
empathy?
we could spend the next 4 days
I
talking
bet.
about that. Just this
It's
question.
a, yes, I'm sure it's its own like academic program. There's a lot to
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that one of the most important things to remember about empathy, which is, trying to take somebody else's perspective. Just remember it's their perspective that we're
Mhm.
really trying to understand. So there's that old saying of, where you stand on an issue depends on where you sit.
Mhm.
And that is absolutely true. So just because or another way of putting that, there's a meme that's been around forever, and it shows two people standing across from each other yelling at each other, and one is yelling six and the other is yelling nine, right? And you see what's on the floor beneath them is this, it could be a six or a nine,
Yeah.
depending on where you're standing. And so the whole point is even removing the word empathy, if we
Mhm.
input perspective taking, what is your perspective, what is your background, what do you know that I don't know,
Mhm.
it helps us to understand somebody else's perspective, because you really can't have a lot of empathy for somebody if you don't understand them.
Yeah, absolutely. So true. I mean, as a practice, I almost feel like there's such a related, kind of shared objective between empathy, but also developing as your leadership, a sense of psychological safety among teams. I think that really begins with having empathy and sharing that forward with your team. Can you say a little bit about psychological safety and how important that is in the workplace, or how to develop it, or strengthen it?
Yeah, yeah. So the whole idea of psychological safety, and I think it's very often, just like the words of emotional intelligence, are often very
Mhm.
misunderstood
Mm,
because they're used so often. People use them differently and sometimes incorrectly, right? So
mm,
emotional intelligence is not about being nice. It's about sometimes having a difficult conversation while we're understanding and managing our own emotions and being aware of yours. And
mhm,
psychological safety also is not just being nice. In fact, a lot of teams that are, I'm going to say, very polite to one another,
mhm,
don't have psychological safety, that they're actually hiding what they're thinking and feeling. So, really, psychological safety is when everyone on the team feels that they will not be humiliated or put down for asking questions or pushing back, that they can actually have real conversations. And so the other thing
yeah,
I'll say about psychological safety is if you have a team of, seven people and five or six of them say, yeah, yeah, we have a lot of psychological safety, and, you think about how that is done, and one or two don't, then
mhm,
the team doesn't have psychological safety, right?
mm,
It's the whole team does not, a smaller group of it does. And so you are missing a lot of information because
yeah.
it's probably not being shared.
Right. Are there ways to assess one's psychological safety in the workplace? Do you recommend any tools for how to really adequately gauge whether or not you have it? Or do you rely on your
Yeah.
employees to share up? How do you measure?
There are ways of doing it, and but what's interesting is if you ask a team leader, does your team have psychological safety? And very often they go, "Oh, yes,
Hmm.
absolutely." And I'll say, "Well, how do you know?" And they'll say, "Well, we just don't have a lot of arguments." I said, "Oh, that's actually not a sign of psychological
Hmm.
safety. In fact, that can be a sign of fear, that people are
Yeah, right,
afraid to say what they really think." So Amy
right.
Edmondson at
Hmm.
HBS did develop one. It's really seven questions, and I'm going to get the number a little
Interesting.
bit wrong, but it's, five of them should be have high numbers and two of them should have low, right? They're asked the
Yeah.
opposite of what you are looking for. I cannot remember the name of it, but there is one out there. And so you have people, everybody fills it out, and it asks things, do you feel comfortable pushing back, or how comfortable are you admitting a mistake
Yeah.
in front of your teammates, and things like that. So very but pretty helpful. And what you see
Yeah.
is some teams have a lot of it and some teams less. The other thing I want to say
Yeah.
about psychological safety is that it is a team has psychological safety or it doesn't. It's
Mm.
not that a company has it, right? So you can't
Oh,
say
that's
company
interesting.
X, oh, lots of psychological safety, and company Y, no. The thing is that some teams in company X have it and some teams don't.
Yes.
So it's and also as a leader, you may have three different teams, and one of them may have psychological safety, and two of them may not. So
Yeah.
and it's not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah, that's an excellent point and something I'm sure people haven't really given thought to, right? I mean, it's not a company mandate. It's not usually a company objective. It's how teams function and the intimacy of those relationships. And I think that's fabulous to point out. Can we talk a little bit about, I mean, that's team management. There's also kind of managing up, dealing with
Mm.
superiors, and thinking about the ways in which we interact with, leadership. Can you talk a little bit about managing up and perhaps developing partnership, persuasion, anything in that realm? That would
Yeah,
be great.
yeah. So I think, it's interesting because I think so many people go through this that, early in your career, you're not managing anybody. And so you think that person above you has all the power, right? That, oh, I
Yeah.
have to do what they say and exactly what they want, et cetera. And then as you advance in your career and you start managing other people, you realize, oh my gosh, those people that
Mhm.
report to me have an awful lot of power, right? This is an
Yes.
interdependent relationship. And that's the thing I think
Right.
that we discover as we start managing people. And so with
Love that.
with that, I think that there's the sense that we understand is what we really have is this interdependent relationship. And if you think about that, it's kind of like a partnership, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way to think about a partnership is, in my mind, is not transactionally. You do this and I do that kind of thing.
Hmm.
It's that you do this and I do that. But if you need help, I'm going to help. And if I need help, I'm going to ask you. Another way to think about it is you don't let a partner fail. And to
Hmm.
me, that is very helpful to think about when managing up because there are times when your boss may be about to make a decision that you think could be potentially catastrophic.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean you have to embarrass that person by saying that'll never work or something like that, but you can go into their office or have a private
Hmm.
conversation and just say, hey, I was thinking about this more and my concerns are A, B, and C.
Yeah.
Because you know what? They may not have thought about that too. Uh,
Right.
so I do think of it as thinking like a partner, not letting them fail and sometimes telling them things that might be hard for them to hear. And not all managers are going to
Hmm.
be amenable to that. So you kind of have to know who you're dealing with.
Right. I wondered if there were strategies for dealing with a manager who is not amenable to that.
Yes.
That's,
Yes.
that's probably quite a bit of nuance to that, right?
There is. And I think, a lot of times it comes up in a discussion about should I stay or should I go?
Yeah.
And there's not always a right answer to that.
Yeah.
And I would say, hey, if it's really impacting your mental health and it's not just a bad day here and there,
Hmm.
that might be a sign that it's time to go.
Yeah.
Right. And but the other thing is that, especially in a difficult economy, or if you're in a place where there aren't a lot of companies that work
Yeah.
there, or hire there, that you may not have as many options. And so I think that, well, a couple
Right.
things. One is that when you have a difficult manager, people ask this all the time about, well, I'm emotionally intelligent, but my boss isn't. What should I
Yeah.
do? and uh, and I think the thing here is that you cannot change anybody. It's hard
Mm.
enough to change ourselves, but you can't change somebody else. You can only change the way that you respond or react to them. And
Yeah.
sometimes changing the way that we respond to them changes the way they respond to us. I
Yeah.
oftentimes think of lots of relationships, a boss,
Hmm.
a subordinate, or peers sometimes, as a bit like a dance that one person moves forward and the other person moves back. So if you
Yeah.
change something in that dance, the other person oftentimes adjusts too. So sometimes it may be thinking, the question I think is whenever you have a problem relationship, whether it's with your boss or somebody that reports to you,
Hmm.
the first thing to do is really to look in the mirror and to just
Mhm.
say, what, if anything, am I doing that might be contributing to this? I'm not
Right.
saying it's your fault. I'm just saying that, again, it's a dance. And we
Yeah.
are oftentimes doing things to keep that dance in motion. So are there things that we're doing? And sometimes it's taking things personally, or sometimes it's saying yes to things that we really want to say no to,
Mhm.
or all kinds of different reasons. So the first is to look at yourself, and then to just say, are there ways that I could, change some of these things? And then,
Yeah.
if you're really thinking about, should I stay or should I go? One of the biggest questions is what have I learned since I've been here? And
Mhm.
what can I continue to learn while I'm here? And to focus on that, right? To
Yes.
bettering yourself.
That's great and it's super helpful. I mean, so many people come to Harvard Extension School to professional development, to come to Harvard Summer School. They're looking for growth. They want to
Yes.
grow, they want to innovate, they want to stay on the cutting edge of their field. I think, can you help us discern what makes a manager or a leader grow, be
Mm,
promoted,
mm-hmm.
find new opportunity, or just be stuck and plateau and have, really limited options? Like, what's the difference maker there? Can you say a little bit about it?
Yeah, growth is a big part of it, and I think a way to think about it is that each level of our career will require a different us in some ways. That as you move up in an organization, you do change your behaviors because you're
Mhm.
doing different things. So if you think about it, the you that is an individual contributor has to learn new skills to be on a team, and different skills to learn to lead that
Mhm.
team, and different skills and behaviors to manage multiple teams. So
Yeah.
it is really thinking about, what does this role require of me to be effective
Mhm.
here? And I do an exercise in several of my classes where I ask people to think about their best boss, and why is this person their best
Oh.
boss, et cetera. We talk a lot about it, and then people think of all the reasons that that's their best boss, and then they
Mhm.
narrow it down to three, and then we say, okay, what are these three? And so I've done this exercise with thousands of people over the last couple of decades. And it turns out that the results pretty much always fall into one of three buckets. That those top three tend to be that they're highly intelligent. The second
Mhm.
bucket is that they're really good at some technical or functional skill. And
Okay.
the third is interpersonal skills, relationship skills, soft skills, emotional
Mhm.
intelligence, right? That kind of grouping. And so when we do this exercise, it turns out that 85% of the reasons that people give are in the top three
Yeah.
are those interpersonal skills. And so,
Mhm.
but those you have to level up. And it turns out that in earlier in your career, you are promoted because you're smart, you're hardworking,
Yeah.
and you are good at these technical or functional skills. You're a great accountant, you're a great data scientist, or something like that. But as you progress in
Mhm.
your career, those become, I'm going to say, less relatively important
Yeah.
to those interpersonal skills. And so
Mhm.
there's that old saying that Marshall Goldsmith says is, what got you here won't get you there. And it does
Mhm.
not mean that intelligence and our intelligence and our technical and functional skills aren't important, but they become relatively less important.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. And it reminded me of Arthur Brooks has written this fabulous book that has really stuck with me over the years, and it was From Strength to Strength. And, again, a lot of what he did was kind of biologically rooted as well, but there is, over the longevity of work, there are, decades in which your intelligence is very fluid. And again, you're very good at those tasks and you're able to actionize, you're fast, your reflexes are there, you're young. And then as you mature, you gain this incredible crystallized intelligence where you see the big picture, you see the dimensions, you see the dynamics differently. And that's where leadership really shines. And it's just so interesting, in the scope of our, say, 60 years of education life here at Harvard DCE. You can, study throughout those decades and you're gaining skills, yes. But we see the soft skills really explode, in the ages from
Mm,
like 39 to 55. The soft skill development becomes so very important, especially with interdisciplinary types of work. It's just so interesting to see how people really kind of bloom into that. It's almost like a maturation,
mm,
and the culmination of a lot of skills and growth. So we see it here in our surveys and in our outcomes and just spectacular things that our alums say are doing out in the world, in
mm.
leading and making change.
Yeah.
Uh, so really just phenomenal stuff. Thank you for that.
Mm.
Now, is there anything that you want to say relative to team management? I feel like we shortchanged that a little bit. We talked a lot about the self and the development, but as far as like team dynamics go, can you think of ways to, kind of invest as a leader in your team and to think about, how to balance their priorities for individual development versus team success?
Mm.
I know your book, and for me, this really helped a ton because I have a small team, a mighty team, small and mighty. But again, like the work just grows and grows and grows. And how do we
Yeah.
meet the demand for the outcome of such work while also balancing the need for individuals to grow in their role and to take on, kind of new things and be happy and to meet, demands on work-life balance. And can you think of,
Hmm.
a way or advice for people that are managing, complex teams, but trying to meet, the needs of the individual versus the needs of the team and the organization?
Yeah. So I'll give you two things. One is that, and this is true if you manage one person or you're managing up or anything, is
Yeah.
that we judge ourselves by our intentions. And
Hmm.
other people judge us by our behaviors. And
Ooh,
so a lot of
love
times I'll
that.
hear from people saying, but I mean so well, right? And I say, well, actually, that's nice, but it doesn't really matter to people. That if you intend to be a good teammate or a good boss, and yet you behave in ways that make people feel small or unheard or something like that, really doesn't
Yeah.
matter that you mean to be. So I think
Yeah.
that's an important thing to keep in mind. But the other part of that is that, this idea of, individual development, team goals, or, we oftentimes get how can I be empathetic and hold people accountable? And I say they're not
Yeah.
opposites. Right? They're not opposites. And
Yeah.
it's just one of the many, I'm going to say, paradoxes that you deal with as a
Mhm.
leader. And,
Mhm.
there are problems which can be resolved, and once you resolve it, there may be more than one good answer. There's
Mhm.
dilemmas, which it's a choice between two things that may have some bad consequences. And then,
Mhm.
but a lot of things are paradoxes, and
Yeah.
paradox means that it's presented sometimes as a black and white issue
Hmm.
or question. Should we have empathy for people, or should we hold them accountable? And the answer is
Hmm.
yes. Yes. And so to me, it's not this or that, it's both, but it's trying to figure out, well, how do I do that? And to me,
Mhm.
I think of it as like a sliding scale, that,
Mhm.
depending on the person, the situation, the timing, all of these things may slide a little further one way or the other. So,
Mhm.
again, empathy is about perspective taking. It's really trying to understand something from their perspective. It's not your
Mhm.
perspective.
Right.
If you have kids and somebody else doesn't have kids, or vice versa,
Mhm.
right? They have a different
Right.
perspective on what their home life might be,
Yes.
or their available time. And it's not a right or a wrong or a should,
Mhm.
right? That's another thing, is that, shoulds don't
Mhm.
oftentimes belong there.
Wow.
Is
That's great.
that, they just have a different situation than you do. And it's trying to figure
Yep.
out, to understand their perspective. And I personally believe that once we understand somebody's perspective and understand that I think it's Brene Brown that says that's their truth,
Yeah.
that we begin to
Hmm.
have a little bit more empathy for them. So to me,
Mhm.
it all starts with being able to understand somebody else's perspective.
Yeah. Oh, that's so helpful. Thank you. I would love the talking about the paradox. And again,
Mm,
like there's nuances and it can be delicate. right? So I really
Can be
appreciate you.
delicate. And
It
also
can
the
be
other thing
delicate.
is it changes over time, right? So it's
True.
not, I think a paradox, that's the thing, is you don't decide and you're done. You are
Yeah.
constantly, I think of it a lot as like a tightrope walker, right? If you've
Mm.
ever watched somebody on, or those, what do you call those straps that people put between the trees? Like I forget the name of them.
Yeah, I know
Uh,
what you mean.
yeah. So, what we look at is their upper body, but what's more interesting
Yeah.
to look at is their ankles. So if
Oh.
you look at a tightrope walker, the little muscles in their ankles and feet are always engaged and always
Mhm.
making these slight corrections. To me, that is what dealing with a paradox is that
Hmm.
you might decide closer over here for now, but you want to watch it that you don't get too far over here because then that has some not so good consequences. So to
Right.
kind of be mindful of those little muscles moving kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm gonna borrow that analogy. That's great.
Yeah, yeah, I use it all the time because, sometimes it's you that's on that tightrope and
Yes.
it's like, oh, those ankles are getting quite a workout now.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Right. There's a really interesting question in our chat right now that's related, and it Mansoor asks, how do you balance the natural competitiveness in organizations or in people, I would
Mm.
imagine, with emotional intelligence? There seems to be a bit of cognitive dissonance between two approaches, that you have more workers kind of changing jobs frequently and generational change even, right? But so interesting, competitiveness, because again, like you will find that. How do you deal with that? How do you
Yes,
balance it? How
yes.
do you address it emotionally?
Oh gosh, a big question, and
I
an
love it.
important
Thank you,
one.
Mansoor.
Yeah, important one. So thank you for asking that. So competitiveness, I think, can mean a lot of different things depending on the exact situation you're talking about. But for example, I think a lot there, I don't know that it's done quite as often as it used to be done, but where managers would have one team, internal team, compete against others, thinking that that's going
Hmm.
to raise everybody's game, etc. And what turns out is it does in the short run, but it actually erodes trust. So if you and
Hmm.
I are on different teams and we're, sales teams, for example, right? This is
Yeah.
oftentimes where it happens,
Yeah.
is that my team will not help your team because we don't want you to win. And
Hmm.
the thing is that we are shortchanging the organization, right? So I think there are things that we do sometimes in our leadership style or
Hmm.
uh, the way we pay or reward people or promote people. And a lot of times that we want the teams to work together, and yet we promote and give accolades to an individual, and so
Right.
we're kind of furthering that. And again, I think this is a paradox that you have
Yes.
to figure out where do we want people to compete and with and or against whom, and where do we need them to collaborate. It's a
Mhm.
tricky one, and also, you know what, if you're somebody that goes to in one of the DCE courses or programs, you're probably a fairly
Mhm.
competitive person, and by the
Yeah.
way, that's a good thing, right? To me,
Right.
competition is about being the best you can be,
Yeah.
and right, and that is how ultimately how you win. So I
Hmm.
think there are ways of harnessing it, right? Are there ways that we can reward the team, particularly a
Hmm.
cross-functional team? And recognition is part of it, is
Yes.
recognizing people for what they do. And that is not always
Right.
money.
Right. Oh, that's a great point. Yeah. I love that question, Mansoor. Thank you so much. If anyone would like to add questions to that Q&A box, feel free to do that. You have so many students in our chat today,
I know. I
Margaret.
see a lot of
So nice to
familiar
see you.
names.
So no doubt, very competitive people on this chat today. No, it's wonderful. Now, Margaret, your book is terrific, and thank you
Oh,
for writing
thank you.
it and to giving it to us. It's a gift. Can you leave or just say, pose a question that you wish your readers will ask themselves after reading this?
Mm.
Is there a thought of what do you want your readers to make of this? What do they ask themselves next when they put this book down?
Yeah, I would say, well, if you haven't read the book or you haven't taken the class, I would say start
Mhm.
with those three questions. What type of
Yeah.
leader am I now? What type of leader would I like to become? And therefore, what do I need to do? And very
Yeah.
oftentimes it's about skills and behaviors. And in
Mhm.
particular, the higher up you go, in general, it's about behaviors.
Yeah.
Because as we do more work with and through other people, we that's really what leadership is all about, is orchestrating that. So I would say ask those questions, and then there are six questions that are in the book that
Mhm.
really get to who you are
Mm.
around who individually people and ideas have shaped you as an individual, because guess what, it all shows up in your leadership style.
Yes.
And situations and events, or your values, or how you define success, or to what degree
Mhm.
do you understand and feel your own emotions, and also what feedback
Right.
have you received over your career, and by the way, in your personal life, because there's this sense that we oftentimes have, is that I have my work self and my home
Mhm.
self. And it turns out there's a lot of research that says they're not as different as you think they are. So if you're not a good listener, you're probably not a good listener at work or at home.
Yeah. No, I agree. And actually, for me, in reading this book, so many of the thoughts here were related to parenting children. And in my brain, I'm like,
Yes.
I think I do this well at work, but I don't know if I do this well at home. You know what I mean? It's
I
emotion.
do. I do know
Emotions
what you
run
mean.
higher at times with children. And how do you really check your emotion in the moment and be able to identify a reaction, right? In the moment. That's a very hard thing to do.
It is, but I love the fact that you brought up parenting, because there's
Parenting.
huge parallels to it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I'll say, parenting is one of the biggest leadership jobs and the most important leadership jobs we will ever have.
Mm,
Yeah, and I will say that, I think my biggest lesson in leadership came from having kids.
really.
And because prior to having kids, I had spent very little time around really young children. I'd never changed a diaper. And
Okay.
so that's how little I knew.
I
And
love it.
as I was leaving the hospital with my first son, I was thinking, if they knew how
Mm.
little I know about what I'm going to do, they
About
would never
humans,
let
right?
me leave, right?
Yes.
Because that would be child endangerment. But
Right.
they didn't know, and they let me take him
Hmm.
home. And I had to learn everything about, a baby.
Yeah.
With him. He's fine by now, I should let you know.
Good.
But then when my second one came along, I thought, oh, I got this now. I got this now. And then I realized, oh my God, my second son is completely different than my first one. And then when my daughter
Love
came along, I thought, this parenting thing, yeah, I got it now. And again, I was wrong.
I
And
love it.
that just gave me the biggest epiphany about leadership. And that is, if
Yes.
my own genetic material is
Mm.
not the same and they don't react the same, why would I ever think that some random collection of strangers at work would be
Right.
similar?
Oh,
And that
great.
was a big change. That was a big light bulb moment for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. There's probably not a parent here that didn't feel exactly that way. Honestly, it's an overwhelming thing. And I remember feeling exactly that way, very young in my career when getting a promotion, say, like, do I really know enough for that? Like, am I going to be able to do this? Like, it's a
Hmm.
little fake it till you make it at times in your career. You've got to be ambitious and be optimistic and put yourself out there at times. And it can be very, very intimidating. There is a question in the chat that's related here. Now, would this book be beneficial for someone who is not quite yet leading, say
Hmm.
earlier in their career or new to a field? As many of our folks here come to Harvard Extension School to completely change careers. So they
Yes,
will,
yes.
again, enter a field probably a little bit more mature, but new.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, it can be. And let me just tell you why I say it that way, is that the book was actually really written, as the class is, more for people that are leading. Because
Mhm.
when if you think back, I mean, I took some leadership classes when I was an undergrad, and I remember going, well, duh. right? Well, of course.
Yeah.
And so it's also obvious, right? But when you get into the workforce and you're actually doing these things, you realize, oh my gosh, this is so much harder, so much more complex than I thought. And so the other thing I'll say is that I asked people as I was writing this book,
Mhm.
I took probably about 20 people and I said, if you could give advice to your younger self, your younger
Mm.
career person, what would you tell them? And I got some really great things back. And then I emailed them back and I said, if I had told you this, or if somebody told you this when you were that age, would you have listened? And to a person, they
Oh,
said, oh gosh, probably not. Right. I had to learn it myself. And so I think that,
oh,
it can
that's
help you
interesting.
prepare. But the other thing I'll say is that I would keep it handy because you can go back and reference it like, oh, I hadn't
Hmm.
thought about that. How do I think about this? But
Wow.
understanding yourself will help you at any age or stage of your life,
Right.
understanding and
Yeah,
managing, and
totally
even in your
agreed.
personal life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really like self-development, becoming a better person, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's a
Yeah,
wonderful
it is
thing.
really.
There's a great, and again, this ran through my mind. You mentioned it a little bit earlier on. Danny asked, what is the role of mentorship
Mm-hmm.
here? So, being mentored through one's career or being a mentor, reciprocal interplay in a leader's
Yeah.
formation. How meaningful is mentorship?
It can be very helpful, right? So I think we oftentimes use the term mentoring and coaching synonymously, but they're
Mm,
different. So mentoring is, as I say, it's giving you the benefit of my experience. So if I'm mentoring you, Jill, I might say, well, if I were
mhm,
in your situation, I would try this or something like that, right? So it's more of a from me to you. Whereas
mhm,
coaching is more about questioning. So, Jill, when you were in that situation, what were you thinking? Well, what else
mhm,
could you try if you were in the same situation, right? So it's
mhm.
me asking you questions, but you're solving the problem. Right,
Yeah.
it's your idea, and then there's also sponsorship, which is if
Oh,
Jill, if I'm your sponsor, when I'm in a room where you're not there, I might say Jill would be the right one for this, right?
right.
So that's like championing you,
Awesome.
and so they're all very helpful. And so, but
Wow.
mentoring, it can be very helpful, but we also need
Mm.
sponsorship as
Yeah,
well.
you're right.
We
That's
also
that's a
need
really
sponsorship.
interesting dynamic to add, right? We all could use some ambassadorship out there. It's
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah,
That's great. Thank you for that. I hadn't myself thought about the role of coach versus mentor. Again, I can count on one hand the number of mentors I would consider of value in my professional life. I think I could have done better to find more, right? Now I'm very conscious of being a mentor if possible, but I don't
that's
think
great.
I should coach. I should sponsor. I think, again, I think that's a wonderful thing to take away and to actionize, the way all of us can look at the role that we play, in mentoring and being a part of others' journeys, even academic journey. We have a great number of mentors that in the alumni world that mentor current students or mentor someone who's jumping into their industry. Thinking about that nuance difference between coach and mentor, it's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, I love that too about the
Yeah,
the mentoring with alumni because again, it's a different perspective and it's a
totally.
it's a perspective that you didn't have before. So it's something to
Right,
consider.
right. Love it. Okay, we've got a couple other questions I'm going to jump into. Oh, this is interesting. All right, Kristen, how often do you recommend people do the hard work of examining what type of leader they are and what type they wish to become? And what's the
Mm,
difference? Are there certain career milestones that require this work? Should you do it annually? Any
mm.
recommendations on timing?
Great question.
I love that.
So I always say start wherever you are, right? If you haven't done it, doesn't matter where you are, go ahead and start.
Yep.
But keep it open because what I suggest is when you think about this, the where what kind of leader you are now, to give yourself these words and phrases, etc. But then you can go and do those 6 questions. You'll come up with slightly different, more
Mm-hmm.
nuanced things to say
Right.
about who you are, because the more you think about how you were formed as an individual throughout your life, the more you see, oh, yeah, that's kind of how it all factors in. So the 3 questions I think is a good thing to do
Yep.
occasionally.
Yep.
And the deeper questions, I say start, but keep it open.
Mm,
I will tell you that my own answer to that first question of, who and whose thinking have influenced you throughout your life is 6 pages of single space type, because people and ideas, whether it's movies or books or conversations you had, etc.,
yeah.
do influence you, right? That those
Hmm.
light bulb moments are, oh, I never thought about that,
Right.
kind of thing. So keep it open because you will see things differently as you go throughout your career. But a
Hmm.
really important time to think about what kind of leader do I want to be is at any type of transition,
Hmm.
because transitions can be tricky because we oftentimes think, well, this is who I am and this
Yeah.
is what I'm good at. And so we just keep
Mm,
going with that. Whereas,
right.
in particular, a promotion is you were promoted because of those things. But what's going to make you successful at this next level is probably a little different.
Mm,
So it's important to think about that then.
yeah, absolutely. Or changing careers,
Or changing
changing
careers. Yeah.
changing companies, being forced to change, right? There's so much
Right.
here in that dynamic. There's a really interesting question, and again, it's anonymous, but how can you better able an employee who's just terrified of making a mistake, or has a difficult time with constructive criticism? How do you
Mm.
help them become more aware of that, but also get beyond that as their
Yeah.
manager? How do you deal
It
with
sounds
that
like
type of
there's an
employee?
awful lot of fear
Yes.
behind that, right? And a lot of times when people won't take constructive feedback,
Mm,
it's because they're afraid. They
mm,
don't want to admit that they're not perfect. But who among us
right.
is, right? None of us. But
Yep.
I think one of the things that you can do when somebody is kind of, I'm going to say, not listening or pushing back or yes butting you or something like that,
Hmm.
that to just stop and just, ask if you can give them feedback on how they receive
Hmm.
feedback. Because really, when you
Yes.
think
Love
about
that.
it,
That's great.
feedback, even though we may not like it and it may kind of go against how we thought we were showing up, it's really a
Hmm.
gift of a perspective we didn't
Hmm.
have before. And you have to think about, oh, is this something I hadn't considered and is probably bigger than I thought? So,
Yep.
and also feedback is to help people get better. And if somebody is not understanding, let's go back to the cutting people off or shouting in a
Hmm.
meeting or something like that. That's going to be a career limiter, some of these things, right? That
Yes.
you may be able to progress for a while because maybe your technical skills, are really great, but it will impede your progress and people
Hmm.
won't want to work with you, and right, the all
Right.
of these things matter. So if we don't know these and we don't start thinking about how we're going to change those,
Hmm.
then it comes at a cost. So I
Right.
would say give them feedback on how they're
Yeah.
receiving feedback or
Yeah, I really
not.
love that. I think, again, and the first thing I thought of when you said, ask for feedback on how to receive feedback, it's the first word I thought was trust. It's like,
Hmm.
again, you're just engendering trust when you are so
Yeah.
thoughtful to ask that question. That's great. And I think it
Yeah.
works particularly well. I think in the workplace, we're dealing with multiple generations that have
Hmm.
different
Hmm.
norms and different expectations, but how to really bridge divides and develop trust among
Hmm.
completely different perspectives there. That's great. There is more of a technical question that really gets a little deeper into a different theory. What are your thoughts on Herzberg's two-factor theory regarding intrinsic motivation and these motivational factors like recognition, responsibility,
Mm.
achievement, advancement? I don't have that linked to be able to share, but if you have any familiarity with it and would like to mention, any relatability.
Yeah. So I would say that we oftentimes hear people say, I really want to figure out how to motivate my team.
Mhm.
And I always bristle at that a little bit,
Mm,
because my belief is that you hire people that are motivated.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Right. So people
Yeah.
that are intrinsically motivated, I also do some work in creativity, and it
Mm.
turns out that intrinsic motivation, this desire to just figure it out, or to do a good job, not the external, not the rewards, the recognition, the money, those
Yeah.
kinds of things. Those are external, and I'm not saying that they're not important, but it turns out that
Mhm.
intrinsic motivation is more important
Mm.
for creativity. And I think that when people are interested in the project or the industry or something
Mhm.
like that, I mean, I've worked in higher ed now for a couple of decades, a little more than that. And
Yeah.
I will say one of the things that's so nice about working in higher ed is that people oftentimes work in higher ed because they care about the mission. And
Yeah.
so, Jill, right,
I
whenever you're
do.
having a discussion,
100%.
the mission is
Yes.
always in the room,
You
right? People
bet.
talk about that. Well, how will this impact students, and is this for
That's
better or
right.
for worse? And
Yeah.
and so it makes it a really there's a trust, I think, in colleagues when you have that, because we
Yes.
really do have the mission in mind.
Right.
So I think that if you hire people that are interested in the product or the industry or something like that, they're more
Mhm.
intrinsically motivated, and it's easier to work through those kinds of things. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
money's not important, but it is not the top thing for everybody. And what's interesting is most of the reward and recognition systems set up in most organizations think that
Mhm.
everybody is primarily motivated by money, when that's actually not true.
Right. When it can be that shared like mission, vision, values, right? All of
Or
these.
learning, right?
Right.
Lots of people like to learn
Yes.
things, or other people like to have
Yes.
colleagues that become friends, right? So, I remember one time I said this was over a decade ago. I said something that in a classroom, I said, not everybody is primarily motivated by money. And I remember this guy's hand shot up in the back, and he said, I don't believe it. And I said, well,
Ah.
and I said, well, oh, okay. In this classroom, I said, raise your hand if you've ever not taken a job or that offered more money,
Mm.
and or you've left a job, or you took less
Yeah.
money. And
Yeah.
I would say somewhere between a third and a half of the hands in the
Wow.
room went up. And I said,
I
there you
love it.
go, right? If everybody was primarily motivated by money, no one would, or very, very few people would have raised hands. And then I
Yeah.
asked people, well, what do you care about other than money? And they listed all the things we just talked about.
Hmm. That's so interesting. Yeah. And I think more and more in, say, the generational divide, balance matters a lot. And again, I think you'll see in some of the data coming out about, the Generation X and Z and all the things, they want meaning in their work. I think that that is just ever increasing, and that's a wonderful thing. So we have a couple of other questions. One, I think we kind of covered, Tony, a little bit more about becoming a leader without having experienced it. I love that because, again, it's look forward to the day, right? And you can prepare yourself and you can get to know yourself. I think a lot of this is just getting to know yourself,
It
to
is,
understand
yeah.
yourself. That's key to so much of life. But what a wonderful thing to have tools for to better understand yourself. It's
Yeah,
going to
and I
be
would say, Tony, the other thing is that, there are definitely people that when they get into leadership positions realize they don't like it.
Oh,
And
yes,
you know what?
that's
That's
great.
an interesting finding too. But we tend to think about leadership, everybody should, go up the corporate
Right.
ladder and all of these things. Well, it turns out that not everybody wants to do that. I've known
Mhm.
several people that have, attained very, very high leadership positions and realized, you know what? I actually like doing the work better
Yeah.
than I like, whether it's selling it or, managing it, et cetera. So,
Mhm.
but I think, earlier in your career, the most important thing is to
Mhm.
be good at what you do. Right?
Mhm.
Because that
Great.
is something that earlier in our career, we are definitely rewarded for our intelligence and our technical and functional skills and our
Yeah.
hard work, right? Uh,
Right.
yeah.
Oh, that's great. Now we're getting on in the hour. There is one more question. This is from Radeep. He's saying, if someone wants to AI proof their leadership skills for a stable long-term career, what direction would you steer this person towards? In a sense, the essence to me is there such a thing as an AI proof.
Yeah. I mean, you could also say recession proof or,
Sure.
technology proof. You
Yep.
could use any of the things that cause disruptions in our life and our economy.
Yeah.
So the thing is that as AI does more things for
Mhm.
us, or maybe you might say to us, that the interpersonal skills are going to become more important because we
Yeah.
are going to need to be working with people. But the other thing I'll say is, I don't know that there's such a thing. If maybe there was in the past, the
Mm.
decently distant past, as a stable career. I don't actually think
Mm.
that's a thing anymore.
Right.
That, if you're at a company for, 20 years, I was talking to somebody this morning and he said he'd been at his company for 20 years. And I was thinking, wow, that's a
Mm.
long time now.
It is.
And so I think that people, even if they stay in the same industry, will
Hmm.
change companies. Many people will
Sure.
pivot careers completely.
Yeah.
More people are having more different careers in their life now. So I
Yes.
don't think we can expect stable.
Right.
And so I think the thing is to really understand your strengths, what you
Hmm.
want, right? Your impact on people, a lot of the things that we talked about.
Oh, I love that. I mean, it's about also developing resilience, right?
Hmm.
And I hope hopefully keeping optimism while developing
Yeah.
resilience, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that is just great. Well, we're quickly running out of time, but I want to give you a last opportunity. If there's anything that we have not covered that you wish to share about, by all means, do or tell us what's next, right? What are you up to?
Yeah. Oh boy, lots of things. But
I
everybody
know.
always asks, "Are you going to write another book?" I say, "Oh my gosh, I just published one. I have no idea." So
Right.
I don't have any plans to.
Yes.
But I would say I think the most important thing is to me, as I was writing this book, I kept wanting to change the thing to leader or person, right? Because I think pretty
Yeah.
much everything in here, and you kind of said that, Jill,
Yep.
is
I felt
that
it. Right.
it's about being the person that
Yeah.
you want to be. It's not just the leader. So,
Right.
to the person who was asking, what if I'm not a leader? Will this still apply? And the answer is yeah, because you're a person, and what you do
Hmm.
to improve yourself as a person always pays
Right.
long-term dividends.
Right. I love that. And again, everyone has different circumstances. I know they may parent, they may coach a sport for their child. They may do all manner of things in which their leadership matters a ton,
Mm.
right? I think just being a good example out in the community now and being kind to people matters a ton. So it's
Mm.
it's just wonderful. So thank you so very much for sharing your insights and
Oh, thank you
for
for having
all of
me.
you asking great questions and engaging in chat. It was just so lovely to read, and thank you for being here in this hour. So, as I mentioned, this recording will be shared on the YouTube channel. And Margaret, you're teaching in the spring. How many courses at Harvard do you have going
Well, I'm teaching a 4 day
again?
on understanding organizational culture, teaching
Awesome.
a weekend class on unlocking creativity, really focused on personal
Ah,
creativity.
great. Hmm.
And then I'm also teaching several different professional development programs, strategic leadership, managing yourself and leading others, and emotional intelligence
Yes.
and leadership. So lots of things.
Ah, good stuff. Just incredible. So many more ways in which to learn and to just engage deeper in this material. So thank you so much, Margaret.
Thank
And
you.
congratulations.
Thank
This is
you.
such a wonderful book, and we are just so glad for your insights. You make us all think very differently about the way that we conduct ourselves.
Well,
And to all
thank
of you
you.
joining, please come back. We hope to see you again. In the meantime, take good care.
Great. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Margaret.